realized that it's about life holding space for me. Every difficult period that I went through, challenge, my successes, my lessons, was what life was doing for me, was holding space for me. So I'm doing that now for the people that I love to be with, as well as my students whom I serve.
Welcome to the Spaceholders Medicine Podcast. We're your hosts, Malvina and Stephanie. This podcast is a sanctuary for spaceholders to delve into the unique medicine they offer. Each episode will explore their personal journeys, diverse modalities, and the profound experiences that inspire and shape their work. Join us as we uncover the transformative power of their craft. Enjoy! Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Spaceholders Medicine Podcast. My name is Stephanie, and I'm here together with my co-host, Malvina. We have a very, very special guest with us, Tay Soo Sien, lovingly known as Sushi. Soo Sien is the CELTA-certified Founder-Tutor at the English Pret Club, an online English tuition service for IELTS and General Paper for Singaporean and Indonesian students. She has 19 years of English teaching experience. She is a mother and also a seasoned broadcaster, and now she is a freelance presenter on national radio in Singapore. She is in love with life, with learning, and with growth. She decided to marry her love for communications with teaching, which she does very well. She helps people get to where they want in life by getting that passport, that certain score for their IELTS or GP by creating possibilities. So welcome, Sushi, to our
Thank you.
podcast. I wonder if you could share a bit about your background and your journey into this world of holding space for others and what inspired you to be a space holder.
I would say that I would never have thought about the term space holding specifically as maybe people in, alternative or the spiritual kind of work would talk about as space holding. But if you think about it, we are all holding space and being held as well. So it's interesting that we specifically zoom in on this topic because I think my first reaction to this question was the space holding that I did for my child as a mom, a relatively young mother. But I can tell you that space holding was not so easy because it was a lot of motherhood was about waiting for the child to grow up. At least for me, I did enjoy her, but as somebody who also needed a lot of time for herself, it was kind of trying to balance the two. So the first thing about space holding for personal experience would be as a mom, you hold space for your child. There were years that were really challenging. I had very bad postnatal depression, which is why I stopped at one as well. However, looking back, I'm glad I did that. And if you talk about space holding, I realized that it's about life holding space for me. Every difficult period that I went through, challenge, my successes, my lessons, was what life was doing for me, was holding space for me. So I'm doing that now for the people that I love to be with, as well as my students whom I serve. Yep.
That's so beautiful, Sushi.
Yeah,
That's so
Sushi.
beautiful, Sushi. Yeah, I love that it started, when you had your child and how that kind of opened you up into the experience of space holding. But you mentioned as to what you were speaking to, it's not just limited to like the spiritual aspect of things. It is broader than that. So I'm very curious, like having worked in fields of education and radio broadcast, how has each of these roles taught you about holding space and connecting with each other or other people?
Yeah, that's exactly where I think it's become so much a part of me, the space holding, because when you are in broadcasting, remember you are interviewing people. When you interview people, remember it's not about you. A lot of people make that mistake because it's that ego thing, right? It's me, it's my voice, it's me on the screen. Actually, it's not. I'm facilitating a message to be heard by the world. I am interviewing somebody. I have to hold space for that person to speak his or her mind. So that really, in essence, is a lot of broadcasting, a lot of radio for me. Right now, I do it, every day. Every time I'm on air, I have to remember to put myself aside, show up as a person that's going to help the business or that person that's being interviewed get the story out. It works across the board, whether it's, I used to be a senior producer and presenter and producer of a tech show, which I loved doing. The consumer tech part I didn't really like very much, but the one on ethics and how we should be human-led rather than tech-led, that I loved that space. And then even then, when I got people to come in, it was really about holding that space for them, making them comfortable, making sure that I get the crux of the message out. And it was challenging. I had like 15 minutes to 20 minutes to offer, but it was 20 interviews every month, new interviews.
That's a lot of interviews and also a lot of opportunities and moments for you to facilitate that space. And I love what you said about being that channel, that facilitator to hold space for someone's voice to be heard in the world.
Correct. And a lot of times for radio, because the time is really packed and there's a commercial message to it, then what you hear is, well, what you hear, but there's a lot of other things behind it, right? But as friends and as people of a community that feel safe to be with right now and here, it gives me great pleasure to not be holding back in any way. My only message is that space holding is an essential part of our lives, because like we also need people to hold space for me as you are doing now, and the fantastic work that the both of you are doing.
Thank you, Sushi. Just now, when you were sharing about your experience and your perspective being a broadcaster and interviewing others, it really felt like such powerful in the moment teaching and reminder for Mel and I.
Oh yeah,
So thank you as you are holding space for your students and also your audience, because you're doing both at the same time now, right? Like you are
that's right.
toggling. What are some practices that you do to create a very safe, welcoming space for the people you hold space for?
Yeah, let's talk about students whom I love, which is why I decided to move back. Really, it's not to move into as a newbie, because I've got rich experience as a teacher, so as a tutor, an English tutor. So I feel that, especially in the education landscape in Singapore. Now, I don't know if you grew up in Singapore, but I did, and it is highly competitive up till this day, whether you like to admit it or not. The difficulty is there's nothing wrong with competitiveness, and Singapore has done very well on that front. But the difficulty is the kids then don't have a space to sort of breathe out as we do. uh, when they come to me, do you know it's more than a student coming to me and me? It's more than a tuition session. It really is about the student wants to be seen. Their parents love them, but may not be able to see all of them. And that's normal. I have a kid, I understand. So, what I do as a tuition teacher is the primary aim is to help them get through school, get the marks that they want, so that they can create all the possibilities that they need. Sometimes they just need that score. People who want to migrate, they need that IELTS score to migrate to get a better life or work, etc. So they come to me. So in terms of holding space, what practices do? I make sure that I show up without the day's hassles. I make sure that I am there with the student. We go through the work, but I also feel their moods. I also understand that sometimes they can be tired. They're not showing up 100%. We need to know why and then meet them there. So that is that space holding for me. And a lot of them do reveal, things that you be surprised, maybe sometimes it's not so related to their work, but it affects their work. So as a space holder in that sense, as a tutor, you have to see the person that you are teaching, and they're not just, a number.
I think that's really important, Sushi, because often educators, sometimes it's more of like good student, bad student, or like, like, but there's so much more layers underneath that. And I think it's wonderful that you're able to offer that and extend that space holding to your students.
And also, I
Uh,
think that, yeah, we forget a lot of teaching. We think it's one way, but it isn't, because, as you both know, you are teachers in your own rights as well. You get a lot back from them, and it's an exchange, isn't it? So I think that there are a lot of things that I have learned from students that I
mm.
didn't know.
That's actually important as a teacher to also know that you're a student in some shape or form as
Correct. And
well.
I admit to them that I don't know everything. So in this day of, it is a very sort of chat GPT intermediated world, right? We also acknowledge that. And where does that fit into our curriculum? It is a wonderful tool. Where does that fit? But as an educator, I am also aware of its limits. And that's the kind of values that I would like parents to know as well. I know that you trust me to have your teenager spend time with me, and I need to give my best. It
Mm,
really is just that. But when you are teaching somebody, you're holding their hands. When I taught my Indonesian students, they used to come to Singapore about 11 years old. One or two of them wouldn't even have known a word of English. So I start at the kindergarten level. And I'm very proud to say, in their testimonial said, oh, they stay with me and then they go to JC, one lectures around the world right now. It's hard
mm,
to believe, but when I look back, the impact of such hand holding, right? It is really fulfilling. And that's why I thought, why not marry broadcasting, a love for communications, to show up, or to present yourself with teaching? And
yeah,
voila, so here I am.
that's amazing. Um, so yeah, then I'm very curious. Can you share a moment whether, well, like when you realize that simply being present and witnessing someone's journey or presence has had a profound impact, whether it's through your teaching or your broadcasting work?
I think if it's through teaching, you really have to sit with a child. Sometimes, as I mentioned, they can show up and they wouldn't have had a good day. We always think us, but actually we're there to serve the students, right? And we need to understand before we dive into the work, how are you feeling today? We do a check-in with them, and also some boundary setting as well. If it's online, then I would ask that they close all their other opened pages and just be with me as I would with them. I would say, if you want to talk about something that is highly significant, something that struck me as a space holder is me being a mom, because being a mom, I tend to finish my daughter's sentences, and we have a lot of assumptions, but we need to respect that as they grow, especially, they may not be the person that we think they are. So the space holding for me in these years has been to really, truly respect her abilities to problem solve and to look out for herself and to look after herself. And it's still a work in progress. And not to give advice, even for, you would assume that as a mom, you have passport to just, give advice, but actually, no. So I'm trying to learn that. And this part of the self-mastery is quite difficult at times, because we are triggered, and we get worried really quickly. And I think the last part about the space holding for students and for broadcasting, actually, ironically, is a space holding for myself. I think you would agree. If I am not full, I mean, replenished, I will not be able to give to the world. And that is the biggest lesson of motherhood, actually, that it brings you back to yourself. It's not about the child. It's not about the give, 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 because then you're going to be at zero. That's why I had, for years, been really confused about that, and was tired, was angry, until I realized, oh, I cannot follow society's tacit message that a good mother is one that sacrifices everything. That made me a bad mother. I didn't want to be a bad mother. But then, you know what? I have made peace with that. I have decided for some time already that the best way to give to the world, to give to my child, is actually to give to myself. And we're not talking about, going off tangent, but we're talking about having that balance so that I show up with my best self. Yep.
Thank you, Sushi. That really resonates very deeply, and it was such a steep learning curve for me as a space holder myself, being a therapist and seeing multiple clients a day, and then recognizing that if my cup isn't full, and I learned that I needed to be so fiercely devoted and disciplined in filling up my cup. Otherwise, at the end of every day, even if the sessions were so meaningful, so beautiful, so transformational, I feel so depleted and I just collapse in bed. And that's not how I want to live my life. Like, it doesn't make it's fulfilling work, but it doesn't make for a fulfilling life. So the most important thing circles back to holding space for self.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also have to say one more thing about holding space. I very much like to do the self-inquiry work with two incredible teachers and friends that also Steph, you introduced, and they are Heiko and Selena. So I check in with them time and again, and it's hard to talk about the work that they do unless you go for a session with them, but they have helped me incredibly to get clarity and also sometimes to be called out for where I should be kind of smacked back into action in life, or, So I'm very grateful for their being around for me.
As am I. It's been such a profound and transformational journey with them, my very first spiritual space holders. On your website, you speak a lot about possibility and creating possibility for others. And I love how you connect, how you serve as a teacher of English to people with other languages as their native language, and how that gives them a portal, a doorway. And there is so much about dreams and possibility and vision that it feels like you are being such a strong, potent embodiment of. I wonder if you might have any insights as to how did these values or virtues become so significant for you, and from when?
All right. So basically, I really get my students who are 16 and above mostly. I mean, occasionally there are one or two who are lower secondary, but mostly I see 16 and above and young adults. When I was 16 years old, I really wanted to leave Singapore because I had a very difficult time here. It was a good school, but I remember being bored to death a lot of the time. And I didn't enjoy school. So when I was 16, I really wanted to leave badly, but my parents were definitely not in a position to afford an overseas education for me, let alone a boarding school. So I decided at 16 years old, some maybe 30 plus years back, to find a scholarship, which I did. And that changed the entire trajectory of my life. And I realized, looking back, it was because I held that space for myself. When I told my then best friend that I'm going to get out of Singapore and try a life somewhere else in the UK, she said, "You can't do that. You have no money." After that, I learned that as much as people can say what they want, because it's really their prerogative, we have to choose the space that we want to be. Then you have to create that space, be it a quietness that you carry in yourself or not. So the last 3 months of my secondary 4 education, I spoke to very few people, and I mostly concentrated on trying to get my several failed grades up. I'm very pleased to say that, yes, I did get the scholarship, and the grades eventually turned into their A's, right? So with that, I know it's possible just to have that longing, but to also act on it and to keep the faith. Keeping the faith is the hardest, but you have to hold space for yourself to do that. Because like nobody will. Well, if you have therapists, that might be different, right? Or you can share with a tutor like me. Like my students will say, I want to get to this college, I want to get to that college. And then I'm in that sense invited to hold their hand in the space that we have jointly created as well.
I think it's so beautiful that you've had your firsthand experiences yourself too with this process of, wanting to go to the UK and wanting to go elsewhere and, surrounding education and putting yourself in the position to be able to fulfill your dreams. And now you are sharing your medicine to your students, right? I feel like there's something really special about that. Um, I'm very curious, given the journey, all the different parts of your life that you've experienced to this point, life often brings so much uncertainty. So when you're stepping into new seasons and phases in your life, how have you learned to hold space for the unknown and remain open to whatever unfolds?
The unknown is so difficult. It is my deepest fear, to be honest. I think it's the fear of all fears. But as I heard somebody say, you also have to kind of learn to choose your fear. Um, it's more like panic, to be honest, when I don't know what's going to happen next. But I've learned in life that you should take a day at a time, continue to believe. I went to the UK with $200 in my pocket. My parents didn't give me any money. I worked from 16 years. So I did everything. I mean, I delivered letters as a post woman in South Kensington in London. I was an au pair. I washed dishes and massive pots half my size. Well, I mean, like a third, but it was all worth it. So I do what I can, but the panic is real. I must say that. And definitely there's a kind of yielding too. When I first given birth, it was so hard. First of all, you're talking to a broadcaster. I can talk to the second, watch the clock. Everything happens like clockwork. My entire life was structured that way. And here comes a baby that poops and pees and just needs to drink milk whenever she felt like it. I was totally out of control. So that was very hard for me. Plus, the lack of sleep was a double whammy. So there is a kind of surrendering. I have to learn to do that, to say sometimes I have come to this point. Maybe I should not have done this or that, but it's done already. So what do I do next? And I think it's served very well by intuition. If I don't get quiet enough to listen, I will listen and absorb everything around me. I have a slight difficulty with that, especially because I've spent the past few years in France, in the beautiful countryside. It's really, really quiet. So I feel I was much more able to tune in. But in Singapore, it is really crowded, it's dense. So I really need to hold that space for myself. And I get it in the aqua spins that I'm absolutely nuts about. I'm at the pool at 1, 3, 5, and 6 in the exercise. And I also get it from talking to people like you guys, which doesn't happen often.
Thank you, Sushi. I resonate so much with what you shared about panic. So, in moments that panic does arise, how do you hold space for yourself?
It's really hard, I can tell you. If it gets really, really bad, I really have to breathe. I have to breathe if it happens in the middle of the night. Right now, because of menopause, there are some moments where I can get into that mode. but I know it's just a period of adjustment. And I think a lot in life is about seasons. And that's what France is teaching me. The first year I was there, and of course I had been, for a long time in the UK. And also I went back in 2017 again to study, and then winter again. I needed to question my relationship with winter because I was like, no, I can't deal with it. I'm a cactus. I'm a cactus. I only like warm weather. But the moment I said, you know what? If this has got to be any easier, it's got to be me letting go of this notion that there is nothing growing in winter. It's dark, it's gloomy, and the moment I did that, I learned that there is so much beauty in a change of a season. Learning to start a fire, it's not so easy, not as easy as you think. Learning to stoke the fire. Did I answer your question?
You did, yeah. And I have a follow-up. When
Sure.
you mentioned about um the change of seasons and also in menopause, what was that
Right.
transition like for you as you were birthing yourself to yourself and midwifing yourself to yourself, from being, like the first transition of maiden to mother, and then now from mother to wise woman to crone? What has
Yeah,
the
I love
experience been
this
like?
topic. I'm so happy you're talking about it because there's not enough spoken about it, even though right now menopause is having a moment on, all the social media and all that. And there's a lot of false information about that, especially when people want to sell supplements. So you have to be careful with that. However, it's something that's very real. I'm by no means through it because it's a process, and it stretches from perimenopause, which starts your late 30s. Okay, it can start in your late 30s and it goes all the way till, you settle down when your hormones stop fluctuating that much. So as the adolescent has to deal with all the eruption of pimples, and, you are starting to grow hair everywhere, things like that. We are beginning to see a fluctuation in our estrogen and progesterone and testosterone. It affects us. So this is the biggest space holding that I have to do. That is to say, as much as I feel uncomfortable, my body has to go through this, and I will have to partner my body and to feel comfortable as much as possible. So for me, the space holding has been to seek out good doctors who can support me. And I'm quite lucky in the sense because of the past few years in France, because I love to cook. The food plays a major role, the lifestyle plays a major role. Eating really wholesome and whole real foods excites me so much. I don't know how to put it, but like just to be able to grow your own food and prepare your own food and feed yourself, because I had been doing that my whole life for a family. So what about me now? Yeah, and I love it that you say you're coming home to yourself, which is what it is. The menopause is coming home to yourself. It's not a dirty word at all. It's very misunderstood. Very, very misunderstood. Very people just either don't talk about it. Some women, they will say, oh, I never experienced such things. And all that then lucky for them.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like there's a lot of fear that's being, associated with that phase of life. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes. There's also a lot of dismissal, as in it's like, oh no, you're no longer fertile, you're no longer a
Mm.
young maiden, you see the lines coming, the skin gets dry and all this kind of thing. But really, is that ugly? I think I'm more beautiful right now than, there's been people who said, you know what, you must have looked so pretty when you were younger. I don't know, pretty doesn't cut it. Substance does. Substance really does.
Mm. What do you what do you love about menopause, or like this, or premenopause, like whichever, this transition that you're experiencing with your body? Is there something that it's teaching you? Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's really teaching me
Mhm.
that if it funny enough, it underlines and emphasizes and highlights and circles and bolds everything we talk about holding space for yourself. Now, if you didn't hold space for yourself in your 20s and 30s, I tell you something, it's gonna make you hold space for yourself at this age. Yeah, I really think that if I do not acknowledge that I need the rest when I need to, that I must not feel like I cannot say a no. Especially, it's a very challenging time because I have aging parents, family obligations, expectations, and yet I love the life that I have in France. How do I negotiate this for me and for my siblings? It's a big challenge. But if you think about it, everybody's just trying their best. They're living their lives. I've got a life that truly excites me. So I want that too.
That's so inspiring. And what you shared, it made me think a lot about boundaries. Where what you said, in our 20s, where we didn't say no, where we didn't have boundaries, where we didn't go deeper and explore within ourselves, it comes up and out now. And it makes me think of anger. It makes me think of fury and rage. And what maybe have been some of your experiences with these emotions that, according to society, women mustn't exhibit? How have you perhaps experienced them within your body, and what's that like for you to come to terms or to befriend, to be intimate with these emotions?
Yeah, if we talk about rage, I mean, I know that it's very visceral. I felt that in my early 40s. There was one night when I woke up and I was literally shaking. I couldn't, I went out to the living room. I sat there. I was literally shaking. And I realized, oh my God, I had not given or allowed myself to do certain things. And you know what? I was so angry. The funniest thing is you look to blame people around you, your closest, because they're easiest to blame, right? But actually, the rage was against myself. I couldn't forgive myself for not having done certain things that perhaps would have had, showed up as a better outcome for myself then. But I needed to feel that rage. That was a very angry period in my life, but I took it out on paddling. I would stab the water. I would be out in the water at 2.5 hours, 3 hours at a time, a couple times a week. And it really, really helped. But there was a lot of anger. On looking back, I would never, to my daughter or my nieces, I would never say suppress that, because you know what? It could come out worse. So it is good to feel it. There was a lot. And I feel so much calmer now. And at the same time, with the rage was a kind of energy that I wanted to conquer the world. And that's what I did. I decided to go back to work full time. I took up a job that I absolutely loved with Lululemon then. And I joke that it's my best $10 an hour ever, because it again was another season where I felt the power of a moving body. I loved it. There was so much. We would work standing up in the shop in Takashimaya for 8 hours. And then after that, I would have paddled and gone for a spin before that. Or maybe we could end the day with a yoga session or something. To come think of it, it was incredible. But then that led to something else. So also the lesson then was that I needed to hold the space for myself, so it would lead to something else, which was my going back to the UK to do a second master's in journalism. And when I went also, I needed a whole space again, because people were saying, are you joking? You are so old. You're 47. You would never, we learn slower. We would never catch up. I think I'm so glad I did not listen to those people, nor people who said that, you know what, if you went, then what happens if something happens at home and all that. I had plan B and C if things were to happen, but the fact that I went, and I'm not bragging here, I'm very proud of myself. I came back with a distinction. The distinction means so much to me, not because it was like number one again and all that. It's because I loved what I did every minute. That is why you can get that. I had never expected at 49 to get that. And then things just fell into place. After that, I went into diplomatic work, and then my station, my current radio station, asked me back, and so I would say yes. The rage served me really well.
With regards to space holding, with regards to everything that you've experienced, might there be anything you might want someone in your shoes when you were 16 years old to know, to remember, to anchor back in whenever their hope wavers, whenever their belief shakes? What might be a guiding principle or mantra you might want to share with them, or even a younger version of yourself?
I would say to myself now, you really have to trust yourself. I know it's hard. Trust when everything around you does not show you how things might be for you, how you want things to be, but trust yourself and hold that close to your heart. It has never failed me. I can tell you that. Listening to myself and trusting myself has never failed. It has always brought the best things in my life to me.
Thank you so much, Sushi. Thank you so much for your pearls of wisdom and all the gold that you've shared with us today. Where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about your work with the English Prep Club?
Yeah, so you can find me at www.englishprepclub.com. And also, I'm on Instagram at English Prep Club as well, and also on LinkedIn. I'm very happy to jump on a coffee chat with people. I just had somebody ask me about pivoting into teaching. So, whilst I can't meet everybody physically, I am very happy to get on a chat.
Thank you, Sushi. I have so much love, respect, and admiration for you. You are such an inspiration to me in all of the years knowing you. And I'm so happy that our listeners and also Malvina got this opportunity to have a conversation with you in this way.
And thank you for the work that you do as well.
And thank you to all our listeners, and we'll catch you in our next episode.